Arteta! What a strike! What a screamer! Zola! And a fantastic goal! Arsenal back in it! And here's Limpar, lines it up, finds the net. Arsenal in front.
We've got Ozil, Mesut Ozil. I just don't think you understand. We think he's pretty good. He plays less than he should. We've got Mesut Ozil. This is the Arsenal Vision post-match podcast. My name is Elliot Smith, and you can block me on Twitter, Yankee Gunner. He does play less than he should, but he is quite a good player when he does play. So we'll get to that later. That's coming later. Housekeeping. Later this week, another player that everybody loves and has unanimous support throughout the supporters is Hector Bellerin, and we will be diving deep on Hector Bellerin, doing an In the Spotlight episode on him later this week. That's coming on the Patreon side of things. And for those of you who signed up, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. For those of you who haven't, we love you anyway, so it's totally fine. We will be telling you about a great craft beer service you may have heard of later in this podcast called Beer 52. But now it is time to talk Arsenal 3, West Ham 1, just a run-of-the-mill, straightforward battering of West Ham at the Emirates for Unai Emery's first victory. We are here with Paul. He is on Twitter at Paz in my pants. Hello, Paz.
Woohoo!
Clive is on Twitter at ClivePAFC. Hello, Clive.
Hello, hello.
Indeed. And Tim is here. You can find him on Twitter at Stilberto. Hello, Tim.
Hello there.
All right, guys, so this is a fascinating match, and I'm actually really looking forward to this podcast because there was a first victory for Emery, and yet it feeds into everything I love about football, which is it makes me uneasy, it makes me worried, it makes me nervous, it gives me things to be critical of, and so that is just wheelhouse territory for me. But let's start with the lineup. As I mentioned, we're going to get to the Ozil discussion later in the podcast, so we can just leave aside for the moment that he was ill. We'll get to that, and that he was not involved. But, Tim, it was another start for Guendouzi, another start for Aubameyang, reluctance to put Lacazette on the pitch with him, as the manager had said. Any surprises for you with how he sent him out?
Yeah, the only surprise for me was that Lacazette didn't start. I was kind of expecting that. The rest of it shaped up pretty much as I expected. I didn't think Granit Xhaka was going to get dropped. A kind of, I suppose, an early theme that's developing with Emery is, yes, he is quite happy to hook players pretty early on if it's not working. The frequency with which he's done that suggests he's still getting a feel for his lineup, really. But at the same time, it doesn't seem like he's going to hold that against players. So he's taken a couple of players off at half time, and they've survived for the next match, for example. This time Guendouzi got hooked a little bit early, and we hadn't seen that in the first two games. So this really seems like total blank slate, complete meritocracy. I'm still fiddling with the lineup a little bit. I'm not going to hold anything against you. If I have to hook you at halftime, it's not because I think you're a terrible player or a terrible person. It's just because I'm trying to sort things out a little bit here. So I didn't necessarily think Xhaka would get dropped. And besides which, this is usually the sort of game that really suits him. And I thought that was borne out by his performance, which I thought was very good. I did half expect Torreira to come in at this point. But that said, Guendouzi had done nothing to get dropped, quite the opposite. So that wasn't a huge shock to me, even though I probably would have bet on Torreira. I didn't draw any breath when I saw it. But yeah, I suppose the one part of the lineup I was a little bit surprised by was Iwobi playing instead of Lacazette. Again, I think Iwobi played really well at Chelsea. But Iwobi usually plays well against Chelsea, and I wasn't quite as sure that this was his type of game. But nevertheless, like I say, Emery's willing to give everyone a fair go.
The only defense of him, Tim, I'd say just quickly, is we did almost nothing on his side of the pitch in general. I mean, everything was down the right.
Yeah, absolutely. But I really expected Lacazette to come in, actually, and for Aubameyang to play on the left. I think I'd had in my mind, and again, there's no actual evidence for this yet, because this is the first game of this type that we'd had. But I had in my mind that for these games, we'd go a bit, not gung-ho, but, Ramsey 8, Ozil 10, Aubameyang wide left, Lacazette up front, just throw out all the big guns, because I think I don't think you can really balance this team unless you play a back three. To me, that's the only way you can balance this team, and I don't think Emery's going to do that. So in in lieu of actual balance, which might take a couple of windows to achieve. I think for these kind of games, just throwing all the attackers on is actually a pretty and letting them work it out is a pretty decent way to go. But again, that was just a preconception on my part, and it's not been borne out so far. I would be a bit disappointed if Lacazette didn't start against Cardiff. I think he's earned it. I think he's, if we're talking blank slates and meritocracies, I think he's made an impact off the bench.
With Aubameyang or instead of Aubameyang?
With.
Okay.
With against Cardiff, I'd play Aubameyang on the left if he doesn't want to go two up front. It's hard to be surprised by the starting lineups because he's changed them so much, even in pre-season, and because we don't really have a read on him yet. I think Iwobi instead of Lacazette was the only one that made me kind of cock an eyebrow. Yeah,
I do like a cocked eyebrow. So, Clive, I guess the thing that one of the things that I will just say, if I can sort of sum up the feeling in the Arsenal world right now, if you kind of want to look at what the zeitgeist is, or whatever word is actually appropriate there. It seems like despite the win, there was a lot of hand-wringing about this performance. And I think some of it is just that we were squinting through two losses to see the plan coming together. And we could see little indications that maybe it was starting to happen for this team. And then in this game, we didn't see, I think, the real fruition that we hoped we would see based on the little suggestions of improvement that we saw in the first two games. So yep. I'm curious why that didn't happen. And one of the things that really bothered me about this game is just the total lack of control it felt like we had over the game. The press didn't seem to really give us the impetus, nor did we seem to have control and possession. So for you, if you had to look at what was going wrong in that first half, where we were really lacking control and why that happened, what do you think was the principal cause of that?
Lots of different things, right? So I think what we're seeing at the moment is a implementation issue, right? We're implementing things in pieces, but not fully. So if you go back to the City game, we focused massively on playing out from the back. So we played in the centre halves, racked up about 400 passes each, and our goalkeeper had more touches than anybody else. So we were playing in the wrong areas. We almost like we had phase one of playing out from the back, but didn't have a lot else. And then we brought on the substitutes. They had a bit of a go towards the end, lost the game. Thank you very much. Get on the bus. Second game, what did we see a little bit more? We saw playing out from the back, but we weren't overly obsessed with it. And so we were much more selective, and because of that, we got more progression. So we got a bit of phase two. So now we know we've got a bit of pattern. And then, but what we did in that Chelsea game, we had a super high line. So our line was too high. So we messed up. Implementation high line, too high, messed up. Chelsea in behind. We're now coming from behind. Lose the game 3-2. Fine. But we started to see in the Chelsea game was a bit more of this right-hand side with Mkhitaryan and Bellamy. And we saw a lot of success on the cutbacks. Okay, so we've seen some offensive pattern. A line was too high in the first half. A line was probably too deep in the second half. So we got an implementation issue, right? So and what did we see in the West Ham game? And each game has its own context. And so I went to the game on Saturday, and I've walked in with my couple of bets I've got on. I bet 5-0. I've gone in there fully Carlsberged up, ready to go.
You should have listened to Paul, because he hit the scoreline nail on the head in the preview pod. Said 3-1 and was spot on.
Yeah, well, I'm not listening to you. No way I'm listening to Paul. Right?
To be fair, you've got your priorities in order, my friend.
Well, I'm Paul picking that one because I didn't. Right? So we've all walked in thinking, okay, Chelsea, City, West Ham are getting it, and that wasn't the case, right? So what do we see? Again, we see a bit more selective play out from the back. We see our fullbacks super high on a home game. We want to win, but guess what? Our centre midfield are not spreading out to the fullbacks to cover them. So now we've got an issue with our centre midfield, and Guendouzi's not getting out there on the right-hand side. He's making slide tackles. He's running behind Felipe Anderson, and he's running behind him looking slower than Xhaka, because that guy can run and he can play. And suddenly we've seen another problem develop. We got problem around our full-back areas, and our two in front of the back four were not really coached or pointed to get out there. And so we looked massively exposed on the counter-attack. We had our back twos defending, We had our centre two trying to get midfield control, but when anything broke down, we were very, very vulnerable. So what we have is an implementation issue. We're seeing pieces of the plan come together each week, and then we're finding out things that are going wrong. And then when I see that, and what fans do when they see that, is they then focus on the individuals that they feel are not doing the job to make the fan feel less nervous about what he's watching. And I thought that happened at the weekend, particularly down Bellerin side, where I thought he was tremendous going one way, but left to be exposed going the other. And I'm not sure it was all his own fault. So at the moment, Elliot, and to summarise, we have an implementation issue. We are implementing parts of a plan 1 week, even one half at a time. But I'm afraid there's a limit to this, because what he wants to do and how he wants us exposed, we do not have the pace in centre mid or at centre half to play this high risk, high reward game that Emery's promoting.
Yeah, I mean, this game for me highlighted more than any game I can remember in recent memory, and maybe I'm just forgetting one, how limited the athleticism in this team is in terms of just running power and pace in midfield, and watching Guendouzi lose the ball and then cannot keep up with Felipe Anderson as he's running by him. Xhaka had a couple situations where that happened as well. Ramsey has a great engine, but he's not a quick player, not a fast runner, and we just lack that.
He's not a sprinter.
He's not. And it's funny, it kind of reminds me, when Liverpool were willing to pay all that money for Oxlade-Chamberlain, I was thrilled that they were willing to take him off our hands at that price at that point. And I couldn't really understand why Klopp was doing that, but it makes a lot more sense when I think about it now, because just another hard-running athlete in the middle of the pitch, which is what he's all about. What I will say, if I had to come up with a theory, Paul, and I want you to debunk it for me because I'm sure you will, as to why this game maybe felt less comfortable and less encouraging than the losses did. In the losses, when we pressed, we looked pretty good in transition. And that was encouraging, because I think a lot of us have been wanting to see Arsenal play more on the front foot, be an effective pressing team. We see the other big clubs doing it and succeeding with it, and we want to do it. The problem was in this game, when West Ham sat off us at all, and we had to build the play from the back, it looked very disjointed, very convoluted. There was a lot of direct passing that resulted in nothing, a lot of very unsophisticated play in build-up when we weren't able to create transitions. So for you, is the problem here maybe just that what was good about us in the first two games came off transitions, and we had fewer transition opportunities in this game, and what became clear is that we don't have another way to build play when we're not transitioning?
Yeah, I think I'm going to say this. I'll say this in my words, but I think it's pretty copacetic with what you were saying. To me, the two things I thought I was going to see in this game was really good, intense pressing up front, counter pressing. And we saw basically none of that that got our teeth into them at any stage. I think that's a huge piece of why Bellerin's wing looked so exposed. And why we were watching the athleticism of our midfield and our defenders running backwards against speedsters like Anderson. That's not really what you want to be assessing in a game. And like our defense at the moment is really supposed to start with this counter press, and we didn't really see any of it of any great effect. I mean, we did some of it. I went back and had another look at it, and we did actually begin to do some pressing, but it wasn't particularly intense. It certainly wasn't effective. We had almost no turnovers in near their final third. Going the other way, working from the back, we didn't actually play out from the back to any great degree. Maybe that was just the paucity of opportunities to play out from the back, but it wasn't a big factor. And maybe we saw much more of that with City and Chelsea, just because they played a lot more in our end. We recovered the ball and played it out, but it was kind of this wonky game where the two things I thought we were going, in the 20th minute, Cech kicks it long just because of the options in front of him, and the crowd cheered, which is really odd because we weren't actually under that much pressure at the back. There weren't really any scary moments, and it's like, I don't know what to make of that. We hadn't been doing as much of it as we were supposed to be doing it, and like we're just a very nervous bunch of kittens generally. So I don't think the people saw the game they thought they were going to see. I didn't see the game I thought I was going to see. It was just a bit of a hot mess going back from one end to the other. There was no continuity of possession from our side. And kind of the top and tail of it, the front counter press was ineffective or largely non-existent, and for whatever reasons we weren't actually building a lot from the back. Mm-hmm. And so it was this kind of, it was a very Arsene Wenger, not the good Arsene Wenger era, but a very Arsene Wenger era game. I think some people thought we were going to be more conservative with our fullbacks, and it's quite clear the tactic is to cheat by turning the dial up full and push the two fullbacks forward. So it made this very lopsided. Everybody's forward, but the counter press isn't working. Oh my God, we're all exposed going backwards kind of game. Mm-hmm. That was interesting, but not very fulfilling.
Well,
I think.
Go ahead. Yep.
I was just going to make a really quick point. I think one thing to kind of note, and I admit I'm doing this in hindsight, this is not what I was saying on Friday, for example, but this West Ham game was a bit like beginning the season all over again, and not just because we'd lost the first two games. It's the first game of this type that Emery's had, even stretching back to pre-season. And I know it's pre-season, but you're playing PSG, Chelsea, Lazio, teams like that. Basically, we've been playing elite teams since he walked through the door, and that's what we'd have been preparing for. We'd have been preparing for Chelsea and Manchester City all pre-season. This is the first time we've had this type of challenge. I think, and don't get me wrong, that really, really showed, because I don't think we really knew what we were doing other than Mkhitaryan and Bellerin combining. I don't think we ever really looked like we knew what we were doing until maybe Lacazette and Torreira came on.
Yeah, that's fair.
But it was kind of a real beginning,
Well, I have a theory about that, and I want to pose it to you, but I'm also going to correct you on one thing. Never admit that you weren't saying that on Friday. No one knows. Just admit that you knew it in advance. It enhances your credibility and only improves the podcast. Well, one thing to Paul's point that I just want to point out, Scott, who I'm not going to have time today, unfortunately, to bring Scott in and do a stats section, but I can just rip his stats right out of the Arsblog by the numbers column as if he's here. And one thing he highlights that I think is really interesting, we basically flipped our tackles and interception numbers under Emery from what we did under Arsene. And so we attempted 32 tackles against West Ham and just 6 interceptions, which is basically the reverse of how we played under Arsene. The problem in the West Ham game is of those 32 tackles, only 15 were successful, and we were dribbled past 17 times. Aaron Ramsey alone was dribbled past 4 times. And so this becomes the issue, is when you are pressing, and if you are going for more tackles instead of sitting back and intercepting, you are going to be in a situation where it's a bit high risk, high reward, obviously. And then he followed up by posting a statistic that Lemon Watcher at DeepXG posted on Twitter, and this is really interesting. No manager has his players foul to snuff out counters more than Pep Guardiola. In 2017-18, 7.6% of Man City's opponents' possessions from open play turnovers ended in a foul, the highest rate in the last 5 Premier League seasons. So City press you, and they suffocate you. But if you beat it, they are not above hauling you down. And there was a point later in the game where they got by our press, and Ramsey had a chance to haul someone down and didn't. I can't remember the exact minute, but I think people probably remembered if you think back. And that's something that I think is really interesting. And if we are going to take this approach, we're going to have to do it. So I do want to get a thought from you, Tim. But before I do that, I am getting a begging emoji from Clive to come back in on this point. So, Clive, hit me with this wisdom that you have stored up in you.
I know you phase out for the last 2 years when I keep talking about pace and power, but
why just really, the last 2 years?
It's about our ability to sprint. And those Man City players that do those fouls are Sterling, Sane, Silva, and they are sprinters and they are firemen. And they sprint at the ball early and never get booked because they're the little number 10s, right? They never get booked. And so they do it early, pick you up and say, cheers, thanks a lot, while all the big monsters get back into their holes. What we can't do is we can't sprint to put out the fires. So we have these runners that do a lot of kilometres, but we're not sharp. right? And that's what needs to change. We need to have players that can get to these spots and either put out fires or get to fires and create duels. And we have got, you nailed it, our dribble pass stats are incredible. We've got to be one of the bottom three, I'd say. Bottom three, without even looking. Bottom three in the league. And other teams are encouraged. West Ham are encouraged. They were encouraged playing against us. I was at the game looking down from upon high on the halfway line, and they fancied it. And the reason why they fancied it is they knew they could beat us to the ball and run away from us. And until we fix that, we have a limit to what Emery can deliver. I promise you that, mate.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. And you know, it is going to be an issue then. I mean, we heard this debate between Carragher and Neville. If you saw the video, if you haven't, you should watch it. The question of should the coach stick to his philosophy or should the coach amend his philosophy to suit his players? I think it's kind of 50-50 now, right? I mean, if you don't have the players to play the way you want to, you just physically don't have the characteristics to do it, at some point it's suicide not to amend your philosophy. We don't know it yet, but it's certainly something you have to wonder about. I still have a question to pose to Tim, but now Paul is giving me a begging emoji. So Paul, why don't you come in and disrupt the flow of the podcast with your wisdom?
Look, I haven't created all this or had my share of creating this concern and turmoil over it. I did think I began to see the future just at the end of the game. It was about the 88th minute, and we have this thing where Socrates pings a ball. He's quite high up on the lift. He pings a ball across diagonally to Bellerin, who loses the header. But at that point, what's his face? Torreira and Mkhitaryan have drifted into the Hector channel that we got kind of pummeled all game on. So they're kind of covering that area, partly why Torreira is on. They recover the ball, and then Torreira does this thing where he pings 4 quick passes, side, forward, back. And I'm thinking this is a bit anticlimactic. Kind of my mood's dropping just ever so slightly, but it's really quick. And suddenly he gets the ball back from the centre back, looks upfield, pings it up to Mkhitaryan, who pings it up to Bellerin, who's charging up the wing, and we put in this cross that could have been the cross that Danny Welbeck buried, but it's actually a few minutes early. But it's a very similar play, and you suddenly realise that what we did was we defended upfield, we scrambled, we swarmed, we got the ball back, we ping, and shook their players out of positions and pinged it forward. And to me, that's what I thought I was going to see more of in this game. I think Torreira is absolutely key. You see him popping into these positions. He pings that ball, short, quick passes, and you'll see that there's a couple of Pep tactical videos about how important it is over on the wings to ping really short, quick passes between people.
Yeah, it's a
short
great video,
distances, not long.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that's what I saw on this thing. It was nothing passes, but I mean, we've all seen
Can I
how
make a point,
quickly. Yeah.
So right after the period that you're describing, like within 60 seconds of it, they were wide open in our area and slid a ball right across the corridor of uncertainty that should have been tapped in for the equalizer. So whatever you're describing, it certainly didn't result in a positive outcome in that moment.
No, it did. In that sequence of play, right through to when it was completed, it achieved its effect, right? In terms of gathering the ball, snuffing out the counterattack, pinging it around, putting us through on the counter. What we need to be able to do is time and again turn the ball over in the final third like a Liverpool or like a City does. But in those couple of minutes, there's about a 2-minute segment in which I felt I saw the future, and it's why I want Torreira there. We probably saw 2 or 3 times in that game after Torreira came on, where he just kind of pops up in the passing lane of the opposition, and they don't know why he's there. And it's like, you can see him, but he just pops in really quickly. He's in the lane, and they hit it straight to him. And that's what I've seen him do in the games and clips I've seen before. He's really good at popping up out of fucking nowhere and snaffling that ball up and kicking you off. I absolutely want to see him start game after game after this.
I would certainly love to hear Emery's reasoning as to why he wasn't started in this game. I mean, I can understand if you're trying to work him in slowly and he's new and he's being integrated. I guess the thought process is that West Ham would sit deeper and he wanted two players in his midfield that maybe are a little better with a final ball or a line-breaking pass. But, I think we saw, to your point, just how much better we look when he's on the pitch. Now, having said that, to me, Tim, one of the issues we saw in this game is the problem we have with the sort of Aaron Ramsey, Mesut Ozil conundrum. And I want to get your take on this because in transition, when we're pressing, when we get the ball off them, you can absolutely see what Aaron Ramsey brings. And, he's right there running into the box. He's on the front foot looking to create opportunities in transition. But in build-up, he's not a number 10. He's just not. Not that a lot of teams necessarily play with a number 10. We've covered that. But I felt that when we were building from the back, when we were in possession and trying to build the play, that Ramsey struggled to be influential there. And you look at Aaron Ramsey in the game, and he had 2 passes to Aubameyang. He had 1 pass to Iwobi. He had quite a few more, actually, to Lacazette once he came on, because Lacazette will drop a little deeper. But for you, is one of the challenges in this game, in terms of our build-up, the fact that we really did miss that Mesut Ozil, that chance creator, that playmaker, because Aaron Ramsey, for all of his running and his energy and his sort of secondary runs into the box, call him more of a Dele Alli type if you don't mind the taste in your mouth, that we lacked a playmaker in the side.
I think we did, but maybe not necessarily in the number 10 role, maybe deeper in the pitch. It's so like you said, not a lot of teams play with that kind of number 10 anymore because they've moved them back. They've moved them back into the kind of more into the number 8 spot. We did it with a fella called Santi Cazorla. And I think one of the problems with our midfield is it doesn't really have any 8s in it. It's got a few 4s and a few 10s, but not a lot of. And that's why I think Guendouzi's been a bit of a feature, because he is someone who can play that slightly more connecting role. And so what Ramsey has had in the past is Ramsey's 2 best seasons, certainly in front of goal, have been playing in front of Arteta and Xhaka, and that's not a coincidence. He's had basically 2 kind of playmaking, deep lying playmaker types behind him, which means that he doesn't have to get involved in the build up. He can concentrate on that off ball stuff. Mm-hmm. And I always felt as well that given some time, him and Wilshere could have been a really good combination actually in a midfield 3, because I think we didn't really see it ever develop, because I don't think it ever had enough time, because they didn't. It seemed like they wouldn't fit into the same midfield, but I thought they would eventually, because what you've got 2 guys who are number 8s, but completely different styles of number 8s. So you've got Wilshere likes to dribble, he likes to carry the ball, and Ramsey likes to run off it. And I always thought that was potentially quite a good mix. Yeah. What we're kind of missing there is that on the ball bit, and be that a deep lying playmaker or preferably a dribbler. Someone who can advance the ball up the pitch, basically. And I think that's what we missed a little bit. I thought Xhaka played well, but
yeah, he led us in final third entry passes, just to your point, from building from deeper.
Yeah, exactly. I think you're right. I think Ramsey, I've never been convinced by the idea that Ramsey's a number 10. I think he can play in a midfield with 2 number 8s, where he's the most advanced, or the one that gets forward the most. That's how he plays for Wales. People say he plays as a number 10 for Wales. He doesn't play as a 10 for Wales. They, again, like most modern football teams, play with 2 8s. It's just he's the one that gets forward a little bit more, and they have kind of Joe Ledley sat in there with him, and Joe Ledley's a bit more of an on-the-ball playmaker type. And it's just the chemistry. Ramsey can play that position, not necessarily as a 10, but as one of the more advanced 8s.
But we don't have the other one.
Complementary. Exactly. We haven't got that other piece. That midfield is still, for me, missing that kind of that connector role. And what it all comes down to is we've still got a bit of a Santi Cazorla-sized hole in our midfield, quite frankly. And, whether it's like a deep lying playmaker or someone who dribbles, personally, I'd really like a dribbler.
Could you move a Mkhitaryan into that position, or an Iwobi into that position, instead of playing them in these sort of nominal wide forward slots?
I think Iwobi's got more potential there. I think Mkhitaryan's quite good in the role he's being given, which is not quite a right midfielder, but in that kind of half space. Emery doesn't play with wingers, and that's why when we were all saying all summer, why aren't we buying a winger? Why aren't we buying wide forwards? He doesn't play with them, not in that traditional sense anyway. He wants his wide forwards to come into the half spaces. That's what he did at PSG. That's where he sat Neymar and Mbappe. They weren't getting chalk on their boots. It's almost a bit more like Pires and Lundberg at Arsenal those years ago. They weren't wingers.
Okay, now I'm on board with it.
they might have when the game kicked off, they might have been standing on the touchline, but they didn't spend very much time there. And I think there's a player missing there. Basically, there's another number 8 to kind of properly replace Cazorla. It might end up being Guendouzi someday, but he's
the closest, isn't he?
We're just missing, I think, that little piece, that kind of playmaker, whether it's a dribbling playmaker or a ball-playing playmaker. Cazorla was both, of course.
Yeah, but those running numbers they published aren't wrong. Jesus, is Guendouzi slow?
No, well, but the interesting thing about those, right? I listened to yours and Paul's discussion about it with great interest, not least because not least because I was at the Player Performance Centre presentation a couple of weeks ago, and had to be careful not to betray any confidences and reveal sensitive player data. But one of the things they were talking about is some players we want to be great sprinters over 25 yards.
Yeah.
Some players, we don't care about that. We don't need them to be sprinters. We need them to move quickly from side to side in small spaces. And Paul referenced the Ronaldo video. And it was interesting, just going back to the previous discussion about, making tactical fouls. Socrates said that, didn't he? He said, sometimes we've got to take the yellow card. And he took the yellow card.
Yeah, he did.
And the interesting thing is, actually, it's not just, I think, about athleticism. I think the more you do it, the less you get punished for it. The reason Tottenham never, ever, 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 ever get any fucking bookings is because they do it all the time. It's habit. And it's the same with City. They do it 10, 15 times a game, and the referee just tunes out. When Arsenal do it, it's a big deal. And that's why West Ham... I don't know about you, Clive. You were at the game as well.
Yeah.
I counted 6 or 7 times where West Ham kicked the ball away when the ball was dead. Kicked it 10 yards out of play.
Didn't get booked, did they?
No, not a single booking. Socrates did it because he's a cynical bastard, and that's part of the reason he's been bought. Booking straight away. The more we do it, the less we'll get punished for it.
Yeah. Okay. So, Clive, I want to let you wrap up this section, and then because there's still a ton to get to. And we want to try to keep it under our usual 3.5 hour running time. So, final thoughts on this little segment here.
I'm going to talk quick. By the way, on the speed thing, it's speed agility and speed endurance. So the speed agility is the short, sharp stuff. They have a special run called a Gerrard run, where you go up 5 yards to the right. And
then you fall down and lose the title?
To the tip, and then slip over and fall. Yeah, exactly. So and this is something they measure. It's all done on one database. And the sprinting speed is normally 40 meters. And this is all on one database from academy level right up to pro level. And so that's the way they measure those things. And on the Ramsey piece, it's interesting. I watched the game a few times, and I was at the game. And if you go back to the 7-pass Ramsey game, we played him behind a forward, and there's an open door there for me to give him a kick in. I didn't, because I felt he was doing a job for the team. I felt it was a bit too high, hence he was involved in zero build up. In this game, he was deeper and more selective and more involved, and I think he's in the 40-plus pass range, so he did better. But a lot of the instances where he was involved in the game, he was literally performing the role of a second striker rather than number 10, if that makes sense. He got into the area, and he was taking shots, he was receiving it back to goal, and I'm looking at this game, I'm thinking, why don't you just put Lacazette there? He's sharper. He's a sharper sprinter to the ball. He's more robust on the press. And him and Aubameyang can share that role down the centre, one going high, one going deep, and create a problem. I think when Ramsey's not giving us no control, he's not giving us a target, we're asking him to do a job of almost a second striker, when really, as Tim alluded to, he's a third midfielder. When he plays for Wales, he has Joe Allen, Joe Ledley around him. They're his bodyguards. And he's allowed to fill in. but then he's allowed to break forward and support Bale and give him that ball in dangerous areas. So his role is defined. Right now, after 10 years, we are still talking about where's the best place to play Aaron Ramsey.
Yeah.
We are still talking about it. And there comes a point when you have to look at the player, because I'm looking at Guendouzi and I'm saying, you actually play centre mid like I'd like Aaron Ramsey to play centre mid. You're always behind the ball. You don't break into the box. You can spread it out both sides and you get your tackles in. Right? He's not, the pace differential is no different. He's got a similar technical flourish to their game. They react well to situations. They're both metronomic, but one stays behind the ball and one finds himself too high up. There comes a time when we need to think, is he going to fit into our play or do we need to fit into him? And when you add the conundrum of Mesut Ozil on top, and now we've added Mkhitaryan, who seems to be defining himself on the right-hand side, we need to think about our interior play, how we control it, how we sprint to the ball, what type of athlete do we want in there, what type of player profile do we need in there. We need to fix that, Elliot. And when we do, everything else will rock around it like a little rocking chair. It will rock around. The fullbacks will rock around. They're high up. We'll overload like City do. Our forwards be in position as targets. But it's that interior, and we haven't got it fixed yet. And that's what we need to do.
Okay, I love that. Let's take a break and talk about the defending because there's some of that to discuss. We can even get to the goals. Why not? We're 35 minutes into the pod. I think it is interesting, by the way, 35 minutes in, we really haven't mentioned Jack Wilshere, and I think he deserves just a quick mention. I mean, obviously his return to the Emirates, but truthfully, I think it tells you a lot about sort of how his career petered out at the club, that it didn't really feel like a big moment, him coming back. It wasn't something that got too much attention, too much focus. I mean, in the social media side of things, I didn't see a ton of people going on about it. And he wasn't really a huge influence in the game either. So, I mean, it's unfortunate that that's sort of where that wound up, but I think, hopefully we wish him all the best, obviously, but I think it's kind of telling that he did not become the central story of this game in some ways. So let's take a break. We'll talk defending when we come back. But right now, it's time to tell you about beer. You love beer. You need beer. You want craft beer in your life. You want the best craft beer in your life. I know I do. Problem is, you run out of beers to buy. You drink the same thing. You want to get the best craft beer. So enter Beer 52. They're your hero. They are all our heroes, the hero we deserve. Beer 52 is the world's most popular monthly craft beer discovery club. They search out incredible and exclusive small batch craft beers from the world's greatest breweries, and they bring them back for you. Just for you. Imagine someone doing that, saying, I'm going to find the best craft beers and I'm just going to bring them back for you. It's what they do. So it's really easy. They're going to give you a free case of craft beer. You literally just pay £2.95. That's it for the postage. This month, you're going to get to discover fantastic beers from the winners of the Raise the Bar competition. Beer 52's search for the UK's best new small brewers in partnership with London Craft Beer Festival. Enjoy the likes of Unity's 7% Export Stout, Boxcar's Belgian IPA, and West by Three's Membership Wit Passion Fruit. All you have to do is go to beer52.com/vision, beer52.com/vision. That's the word beer, which is spelled B-E-E-R, by the way, the number 52.com. But these guys are the best. The craft beer they send are incredible. You even get Ferment Magazine and a snack all sent to you. So get a free case of craft beer. Let us know what you think. Go to beer52.com/vision. Okay, now let's get back into the downer part of the podcast, the defending. I think we have to touch on this a little bit because whatever the coach is trying to achieve with this system, I think against West Ham, it really broke down in substantial ways. The thing that really was discouraging to me was just the amount of space that players could run into. And so for the goal, Felipe Anderson picks the ball up about 30 yards from his goal. He runs to the edge of our box. And in that entire time, he literally never has an Arsenal player within 5 yards of him. I mean, he runs the entire length of the pitch with no one anywhere near him. When Guendouzi gets the ball taken off him, again, Anderson running in acres of space. Now, we'll get to Mustafi and what he does there and some of the Mustafi issues from this game. But for you, was the defending in this game cause for real concern that maybe the system is not properly set up to keep us solid? Because there's part of me when I heard, we're getting this pressing coach. Yay, we're getting the next Klopp. We're getting the next Guardiola. When I watch it, there's a little part of me, and I know we're just 3 games in, that says, oh no, we've gotten the next Andre Villas-Boas. So how do you feel about the acres of space that we saw in this game for West Ham to exploit?
I'm fine with it.
Cool. All right, moving on.
It's what I expected to see. I mean,
really?
It's horrible. It's ugly. we feel naked and exposed, like a really bad dream where you're naked and exposed.
Yeah.
But we can't talk the talk about, how long it's going to take, etc. About how we want pressing up front. When the pressing up front doesn't work, you're going to be wide open in the midfield. I'm not going to claim we have the world's greatest defense. We don't. I think it's looking worse than it actually is. I think, and we're going to tend to blame in order of preference Mustafi and Bellerin, and then Socrates, and then Nacho. But if you watch Nacho in the first 20 minutes, he gets rinsed 3 times.
I don't think he had a very good game defensively either. It's just that Bellerin was so far up the pitch most of the game and got exploited. I guess what I'm asking you, Paul, is what's supposed to be happening in those spaces? Let's say the system was working properly. To me, I don't even see what's supposed to be happening to plug those spaces, to block off those runs and that room. And so in your mind, if it was, let's say it's 6 months from now, what's going to be different that those spaces aren't going to be available?
Well, I think that's exactly right. I think that's what everybody's feeling. You can't see what the plan was because, we're just so fucking stretched out. But when you send Bellerin and Mkhitaryan into that far right corner and we lose the ball and there's no counter press, it's one of those, what do you expect to happen down that side? You've only got 2 midfielders. You got no right back. And you got Mustafi in. We probably got some form of a high line in which everybody's saying, "Oh, if there's no pressure, you got to drop off. You got to drop off." You remember that bit from last week against Chelsea?
Yeah.
What are you going to get but space down that side? It's an invitation for them to, and they are going to be allowed to run down that side because if you dive in, we've already said our midfielders are, say, medium pace against Anderson going down that wing. If they dive in, you're down one more man. So you're basically going to escort him down the wing. He's going to have more pace, and you're going to look like we looked. So until we get the counter press sorted out, until we move more cohesively with the midfield, timing it and positioning it with Mkhitaryan and Bellerin and Mustafi getting his spacing right, we're just going to look ugly for months and months. I don't know when people say things like we talk the talk at the start of the season, but we can't walk the walk as supporters. Understandable. We're anxious. We know how important these 3 points are. We think progression is going to be this straight line up where we're going to be bad, but we get slightly better and slightly better. It's not going to look like that. This is what buy-in looks like. This is what progression looks like.
Well, and we did win,
Yeah. Well, but forget the result. We will take steps backward before we take steps forward. It'll look ugly. Players like Bellerin will look shit. Players like let's take a good one here.
Mustafi is always one you could just grab if you're looking for one.
Yeah, I don't want to go that way because...
well, can I stop you just for 1 second,
But
Paul?
there are multiple... Well, yes, in 1 second. There are multiple players who will look worse than they are and are actually being courageous because they are going to look shit in front of 60,000 people and millions of viewers because they're buying in and doing things that maybe don't really suit their game as they saw it in the past and have them playing in different ways and are going to expose them. So
the players themselves...
Frustrating. Yeah.
Well, I was just going to say, you also have to take the players' words for it. The players themselves acknowledged after the game we need to be less open. Socrates had some comments about it. Aaron Ramsey had some comments about it, that we're not getting the balance right between how we're supposed to be playing in possession and out of possession. And, again, I totally agree with you.
I think that's more about working as teams and units and coordination. It's not about doing something different. It's to Clive's point, it's all execution. And this big fucking hole in the middle is when one part pulls one way, the other doesn't quite respond and anticipate. And if you don't counter press and you've got literally 7-8 players in their final third, you're going to be a bit exposed when you get hit on the counter.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Look, I think the only thing I would say to some point is I agree with you that it's not going to be straight line progression. But what was a little tough is in those first 2 games, you could look and see the plan and kind of understand what it was intended to do. And you can draw some positives from that. I think what worried me a little in this game is there were moments where I didn't understand what the plan was in terms of attacking the way he wants to attack without being totally open. And if you're going to use...
But City and Chelsea kept us compact, whether we liked it or not, because
well, I think we
they
did
had
that
more
by
of the
design
possession.
too. But Paul...
But they had more of the possession.
Come back in, Clive. Sure, why not?
It's an implementation issue. That's all it is. We're implementing things piece by piece, and we're just falling down in specific areas. I think, Paul, your point there about being brave and courageous, that's a really interesting one. I think what we need to realise as fans is we don't know what the players are being told. From the moment you see Aaron Ramsey have a 7-pass game and Mesut Ozil have a 10-pass game, all bets are off. All right, all bets are off. We have to judge these players completely differently to how we've previously judged them. And you know what? Maybe we actually know these players as well as the manager does right now. He's learning about these players and he's putting them in holes and he's discovering things. And that's why, Elliot, the line isn't linear. It's a bit choppy, right? And we sort of expect it to be a bit smoother on at the weekend, and it just wasn't.
It's going to be a random walk, is what it's going to be.
It's awful. It's awfully nervy. It's awfully nervy. And it was I did not enjoy the game at the weekend. I did not enjoy it. I don't
think you're alone. I
did not enjoy. I sat, I know where Tim sits. I was about 20 rows behind him on the halfway line, and I did not enjoy the atmosphere. I did not enjoy how the fans were reacting to the players. It was not a pleasurable experience for myself on the day. I don't want to brush it entirely with the same brush. And I think it's because what we're trying to discuss here with a little bit of thought is happening live to people, and they're nervous and they're reacting to things they're just not unsure of, and they're looking at this and they're not maybe thinking it through, which you don't do on a day when it's all live, and we looking ugly as a crowd, if I'm honest with you. That's how I felt. That was my impression when I walked away. And I go like once a month, I come away with a different impression each time, and I came away thinking, wow, we're struggling with the change on the pitch and off the pitch, and the way it manifests itself is picking on certain individuals, which I'm sure we'll touch on.
No, sure,
later.
all right. Look,
and
but
to me, this is what change looks like. It's going to look ugly.
Yeah,
we're going to look worse.
Okay, let's move on. I think, Tim, for me, one of the things that is interesting about halftime changes is because we're so unused to them, they're so exciting. But they also mean you got it wrong from the start. Where do you come down on the halftime changes? First, in terms of whether you thought they were the right ones, which personally I do. But second, just on how much do you allocate to it being brave and competent management, and how much do you allocate to it being a worrying sign that you're in consecutive games where you got it wrong from the start?
It's a little bit of both, but I think it deserves a little bit of leeway just because he is still kind of working out his team. He's working out what they can and can't do. So, yes, of course, it's an admission that if you keep having to do that, it's because you keep kind of getting the starting lineup wrong. But, I mean, that's kind of to be expected, really, at this stage. It's all very well watching players like Granit Xhaka and Alex Iwobi, and we know in the interview Emery was meant to have impressed because he's done all the research on the players and he knows them, but he, like everyone else, only knows them in the context of what they were being asked to do last season. He knows what they look like in an Arsene Wenger team, but nobody, not even the players themselves, knows what they look like in an Unai Emery team right now. So there is going to be trial and error, and like Paul said, change is ugly. That's how it happens. I completely agree. I think we'll get... I know we keep drawing this comparison to Klopp and Pochettino's first seasons, but I think it's really worth doing, because what did you see in their first seasons? You saw a lot of, oh my God, Liverpool lost at home to Crystal Palace. How did that happen? Or Spurs drew with Aston Villa. Like, what's happening there? And that doesn't happen to those teams anymore. They largely win the games you expect them to win. But this is, it's the same. And I know we're going to come on to this later. It's the same with individual players. This is what organisational change looks like. Eggs are always broken when you're making the omelette. This is a massive, massive, massive change for Arsenal. This is, and it's not just the manager. The playing staff is almost unrecognisable from the last 18 months. All of the support staff is different. Everything is different, basically. And in any organisation, whether you're an elite sports team or whether you're an accounting firm, this is what change looks like. It's a process of trial and error, and some pretty big eggs get broken. That's just the way it is. If you've ever worked in a firm where there's a new director, what happens? Usually like a CEO or someone goes, or one of the junior directors, or there's some kind of big ruptions that happen, and it's not always immediate. Sometimes it's immediate, sometimes it's right, I'm here now, I don't like you or what you do, or I need someone to do something different. Sometimes it takes a couple of months to work that out. Sometimes it's 6 months in and it's like, do you know what, I don't think you're really what I need for this organisation. It's exactly the same for a sports team, and Paul's exactly right. It's going to be trial and error basically for a year. And what's really interesting about this year, and Elliot, I know you talk about this a lot, Arsenal have kind of already used up their transition tariff on Arsene Wenger. We've had 2 years so on one hand, there's going to be some short-term pain for long-term gain, but on the other hand, we've already had 2 years of supposedly short-term pain, and if we have any more, it's not short-term anymore. So for me, the interesting thing is Unai Emery has about 3 years work to do in 1 year, because if we spend another year outside of the Champions League, that's it. That's what we are. We're a Europa League team. We'll get Europa League level players, and we're potentially in a very difficult position to come back. So what's basically happened for the manager is 2 of his bedding years have been taken up by Arsene Wenger. And so he's got to find stuff out really, really quickly. And for me, I'm fine with breaking a few eggs. I'm fine if like a couple of big players, decide that they don't want this, or we have to sell them or whatever. I'm fine with that, and I'm fine with him finding things out quickly. I'm fine with him in August and September going, right, you're not doing what I need you to do. Fine, 45 minutes, that's it, you're off. I won't judge you for it for the next game. I've asked you to do something you can't do, and I'm all for him. I'm all for this being quite rickety in the first couple of months. I'm all for quite a lot of half-time substitutions, because Emery has to come to some quite quick conclusions, because he can't still be doing this in November and December, because we can't fall back that far. He's got to find out a lot of information very quickly, and that, I think, means probably making some snap decisions. And so far, he's shown an appetite for that. Whether they're the right ones, we won't see for the fullness of time. But I really liked Paul's kind of analogy on the pre-West Ham podcast about this being like a crime scene, and everyone just needs to step the fuck back and just let like people do their work for a couple of months.
Nakedgun.gif. There's nothing to see here.
Indeed. And also, I completely agree with Clive's point. I've been so disappointed with the crowd. Last year, I guess I just put it all down to, Wenger's still here and people are a bit pissed off, and I understand that. This to me, there's a lot of people just being a bit silly, a bit immature, a bit unable to control some quite basic emotions. Every time we play out from the back, even when Czech just goes to roll the ball out, everyone starts like shitting their pants, and it's so annoying. And they're not doing it because anyone's actually in danger. They're doing it to make a point. And it just really disappoints me, because it's like, this is the change we all wanted, and it's not going to happen overnight. You guys, all of us, not you guys. Sorry, I don't mean to like.
I'm totally fine with whatever you're about to say. I'll own whatever it is. Just lay it on me.
No. I mean, all of us as fans, we all asked for this. We moaned for this. We whinged for this. We pressed for this, and I think we
flew airplanes for this. Depressingly enough.
So shut up and let it take hold for at least a couple of months. And I've been really disappointed with both the basic intelligence and the emotional intelligence of the crowd. I really, really thought that at least five or six games, they'd shut up, just watch things unfold and make their judgments later. But what we're learning is that it wasn't all about Arsene Wenger. It's just some people are miserable bastards and some people are just not very smart.
Can I make I just want hang on. I just want
out of jail. Everybody
stop.
Jail card is I just want to see progress. But this is progress.
Just
you
everybody
go
stop.
backwards first.
Everybody stop.
I'm seriously, I've got to say something on top of that. I mean, it's really starting to affect the enjoyment I have of watching the game. And I've been going since late 70s. It is awful. And it's not about football snobbery here. This has been an environment that's been around for the last 5 years where it's been quite angry towards the manager. We have what we supposedly want, and then we give the guy 2 games and we're on him already. I mean, it is just... I tell you now, it's not about the football. It's not about the manager. It's about fans and how they feel and their expectations when they walk into a ground and what they expect to see and feel. And we as a club are not fulfilling that, and they care about themselves. And I don't care what you say. I've seen it. I've heard it. I've been arguing with people all weekend about Hector Bellerin. He's not perfect, but without him, we don't win that game. If you can't see that, then
it's a great reason to listen to our In the Spotlight episode later this week on the Patreon. I would strongly recommend it.
So I feel Tim beautifully said. I feel just as strong.
We've gone like 80,000 foot view on a game that has plenty of granular issues we can dive into, and I think everything you all have said is articulate, eloquent, and accurate.
Thank you.
My defense of the fans would only be that I think the irony of the disappointment in the West Ham game is that I think it was born out of a little bit of encouragement from the Chelsea and City games. I think, I know that, I mean, I predicted 5-1 Arsenal because, first of all, I'm a moron. But second of all, I actually felt so excited by some of the things I saw in the first 2 games, and especially that first half against Chelsea, that I kind of just thought, wow, we're closer to clicking than I expected, and we're really going to hammer West Ham. And so, pun intended. But so I do think some of the disappointment, ironically, was born out of more encouragement from those first 2 losses than might have been expected. And that's the only problem, right? Expectations were very high for this game.
Yeah, but it's how those disappointments are manifested. When they're manifested to the point where players are getting abused and they don't want the ball in wide spaces or don't want to be caught in wide spaces, then you're affecting the team. Then you're affecting how the team operates. And that's what I was seeing. Players receiving the ball with closed shoulders, going backwards, people shouting at them, saying, why don't you take them on? And all it is nerves. I get it. We're all nervous. We all go through different emotions during the game. And sometimes you're cool and sometimes you're not and you can't explain it. But it's football and we wanted this change. And none of us know how it's going to happen. So open your mind to it. Don't talk about it. And when it comes, you want it your way. Open your mind to what could happen. Amen. It could be wonderful. It could be rocky, but it's going to be different, and we've all wanted that. But I'm
and it's not going to be straight line improvement. And Elliot, you've just asked for straight line improvement. You're not going to get it. It's going to be one game good, one game. You have.
I have not.
You said because you did. You said
we made the assumption.
City and Chelsea.
We made the assumption.
That
and
now
I did too, Elliot. I did too. 5-0.
Listen,
my
guys,
bet went
there's
down.
A difference
5-0.
between expecting it and just having your expectations raised
and
organically.
Really hoping first.
Well, sure. Yeah. What I'm saying is, let's say we had just beaten West Ham 7-1. Let's say that's what had happened, and we were a swashbuckling, dynamic, incredible team. No matter how much in the back of your mind your intelligent brain is saying, be patient, be patient, be patient, there's going to be a part of you that thinks, we're going to go fucking hammer Cardiff now too. And I know that's not how it works, but
correct.
It is.
It's not how it works.
No,
it's going to be a random walk.
But if you're asking people to watch football, have a drink, go to the stadium, watch football, and totally divorce themselves from the emotions that well up in them organically, I think first of all,
we don't need to go to extremes, though.
Right.
Yeah,
okay.
I that's the thing. I don't think this is all, because there are some things that are organic. Some, like Clive says, you get nervous. I do and say things in football grounds that if I think about it afterwards, I think, well, that was stupid and that was just purely
I do it
emotional.
on a podcast, so
this is different though. This is like a goalkeeper just about to roll the ball to a centre back, and people like basically crying. And it's just like that. That's not a nervous situation. That's not an emotional moment. But people are choosing.
That's just idiotic.
Choosing to be angry. There are moments that make you angry in a football game, or there are moments, if someone is like up the arse of one of your players, everyone just shouts man on, which is helpful, but it's a product of nervous energy. But someone rolling the ball out to the centre halves, for fuck's sake, that is not like a nervous, emotional moment. That is the most.
And they know better, Tim. This is what the best teams do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you just watch City come to the Emirates and kill us by doing it. So, I mean, surely it's the right way to go. All right, look, Tim, let me ask you just a quick question then about the defense. So, if we're going to do this thing where we attack down the wing with Bellerin and Mkhitaryan, and we were very effective doing it, and Bellerin had a brilliant attacking performance, he also found himself in situations where he's, square on the halfway line with 50 yards behind him and 2 players running into that space. Yeah. What needs to happen to protect that space? Do Guendouzi and Xhaka need to split and drop to cover the wings? What isn't happening? And in your mind, and I realize you're not the coach, but if you are and you're looking at that game film and you're saying, all right, we did great work up the right side attacking, but it left us too exposed. What is supposed to be happening that isn't, to give us a little bit of the security that we lose when Bellerin and Mkhitaryan go raiding up the right side?
Well, I think it's probably going to be down to the midfield 3, isn't it? You look at the way Emery operated at PSG, who's a really, really good player, who's not quite a winger and not quite a central midfielder, Blaise Matuidi. And that's why France play him, even though he's not an elite level player. He's a very good player, but he's not on the level of those other France players. But they play him because he can play in that kind of midfield 3. He can shuffle over to the touchline, and he can come inside. A bit like Ray Parlour used to do, I guess, for Arsenal, where he was, almost in that half space, but as a midfielder. And I'm guessing that's what we've bought Lucas Torreira for, because that's meant to be one of his great attributes, that he can cover fullbacks, that he can get across the width of the pitch. And again, this is the different type of running that we were talking about earlier. It's not straight lines. What Torreira is meant to be very good at, and I haven't seen enough to confirm this one way or t'other, is getting across the pitch. And actually, that was something that Francis Coquelin, I thought, was quite good at. Coquelin...
Tim, you took the words out of my mouth. This team would suit Francis Coquelin. I was going to say that. It would, wouldn't it? You can see it. Sprinting speed, collision, sort you out.
Yeah,
perfect
exactly.
for this team.
Exactly. But just don't put him over the halfway line. Just have him in front of the defence, patrolling side to side. And I'm guessing Torreira is going to do maybe a version of that. And we certainly looked a lot more secure when he came on. Because the thing is, with Mkhitaryan and whoever else plays in those wide positions, they're being asked to come in field. That's how Emery plays. He likes his wide forwards to come right in field and make a triangle for a front 3. And it works very well going forward, but you're right, coming back, it can look pretty bad. And that's why I kind of wondered if we'd end up with not quite a midfield diamond, but something, maybe the 3 points on the diamond rather than the 4th point at the top. And so I'm guessing that that's what's going to happen, is that Torreira's going to take up that kind of, Xhaka, you sit there, I'll go from side to side. I'll cover the fullbacks, and you do what you do. You kind of sit here and redistribute the ball. That's what I'm guessing is going to happen. And to be fair, that looked a lot more like what was happening when Torreira came on.
Yeah, and
towards the end, it was working, wasn't it, Tim? Towards the end, you could see the start of something. Yeah. So another thing implemented. So we're seeing 1 or 2 things implemented each game. We just haven't seen the game yet, where 5 or 6 of these things are working at the same time. And I think Emery needs to think about some of the partnerships he has that would work, and why split them? Like, for example, the front 2. Why split them? We know it works. Keep them on. Give yourself an insurance policy while you're waiting for other things to bed in. We seem to have found a midfield 2. We've got no choice but centre-half 2. We've got a right side 2. So we're starting to develop something here. We got something to do with the 10 or the high 8. We potentially got something to do on the left-hand side, but we're starting to see the partnerships develop and the roles develop. We just haven't seen it in one game.
Well, and I do think you have to, at some point as well, acknowledge that if you're going to play this way, sometimes your defenders are going to get isolated, and they're going to have to defend difficult situations. And I actually think Socrates has been pretty good. I think he's done all right. I think Mustafi has still struggled, and I realize I pick on the guy, but like that situation where Guendouzi lost the ball and he couldn't chase down Felipe Anderson, and Mustafi just backpedaled and stood there and didn't close him down. Eventually, it results in a ball going to the penalty spot and should have been a goal. It's because Mustafi knows if I go out there and try to defend Felipe Anderson, I'm going to get rinsed. He's gonna just go right past me, and I'm going to get exposed. And so he did nothing. He just kind of froze. And I think, as much as you hate to just pick on players, this system is going to create situations where central defenders have to put out fires in tough situations. And I think Mustafi has been left wanting in that respect. Tim, it sounds like you had something to add there.
I was just going to say, whereas Socrates strikes me as the kind of defender that really relishes that one-on-one defending. He reminds me of, he's not quite as quick across the ground, but he reminds me a bit of Kolo Touré in that respect. But
Tim, are you a mind reader or what?
In that Kolo loved a one-on-one. He loved a one-on-one. Where Kolo's Arsenal career slipped away was when he was asked to do something a bit more, or I hesitate to say mature, where he was asked to be a bit more of a patroller. What he loved was one-on-one, duels. I'll race you, I'll tackle you, I'll kick you out of the ground. He had that kind of enthusiasm, and Socrates has that. What he really likes is one-on-one. I'm up your backside, I'm in your shorts, I'm in your shirt, I'll kick you in the air if I have to, I'll take you out, I'll slide tackle you. He likes that. I don't think Mustafi does, because Mustafi is not as natural a defender. What Mustafi is good at is playing the ball out, and if you look at the passing numbers, Mustafi is the one who's passing the ball out, and that's where his value is. But in terms of proper defending, it's that's what Socrates likes.
Yeah, I agree with you. And Tim, the funny thing about you invoking Coughlin that I thought was really interesting, Coughlin's tackling numbers were through the roof, off the charts, in a team that didn't really defend that way, right? It was very based on positioning and interceptions and stuff. Now we have a team that clearly wants to tackle more, and he was a guy who always did that. So I think it would have been really interesting to have that fit in this team. And I've never been a fan of his, but I thought that was, a really interesting guy to bring up. The reality is that it is a work in progress. But so, Paul, I want to sort of interrogate a point you made, which is, you're saying we have to be patient. I totally agree with you. That it's going to be a couple steps forward, a couple steps back. It's going to be what did you say? Something walk, unpredictable.
A random walk.
A random walk. Okay. But so then here's my question. Doesn't that mean we also have to resist believing certain players should start over other players? So, for example, a lot of people are saying clearly Lacazette needs to start now. We look better when he's on the pitch. He needs to start. But if you believe that this is a process, and part of the process is that Emery believes strongly in starting with one up front, and he believes that Aubameyang is that guy, at what point do you say, nope, we look better with Lacazette, that much is clear, he makes us better, he needs to start too? Or do you sit back and say, trust the process, it's a random walk, and this is what Emery believes is the best system?
Well, I mean, he said he believes one striker up front for now. He doesn't say one striker up front forever.
Yeah, sure. I'm genuinely asking. That's not a pointed question. Yeah. I'm just asking.
But I think Emery is being very open-minded. Tim's kind of touched on that. He'll drop a guy, he'll play him again. Xhaka is a good example. Xhaka, I thought, had a very good game in this. Guendouzi's interesting in this game, and it may not sound like I'm answering your question, but I'm actually trying to. Guendouzi had a good game. Not a great game. He gave the ball away a couple of times, especially dangerously, and in the second half over in the Bellerin corridor. And I reckon the manager was already itching to bring Torreira on. So Guendouzi gave it away twice over there, and somebody else gave it away. And then Guendouzi gets yanked, and Torreira comes in. And I think, to Tim's earlier point, it almost feels like Emery's kind of approaching these games like serious pre-seasons games where players will get yanked at halftime or 55 minutes. And to your point, Elliot, I think he's basically saying, I have an open mind, because he does, and he's trying different things, and he has his initial thoughts, which is it should be Aubameyang up front, but he keeps finding every time, well, apart from the Chelsea game, he keeps finding every time he goes that way, actually Lacazette plus, but to be fair, there was a cost to Lacazette starting up front in the second half. Aubameyang didn't look that good. I mean, he didn't look terrible, and he had a couple of moments, but it definitely bumps him down the list a little bit. So there's a lot of things in play here, in change. I think I do want to take the opportunity to say that my forgotten man coming into this season was Mkhitaryan with the slow preseason. And to Tim's point about preseasons, he was the one guy who decided to think this was all about conditioning. I think he's been pretty close to excellent. I think he fucking ran this game. And when you think about our ups and downs with Ramsey and Ozil, and we talk about it's got to be, say, Aubameyang and Lacazette starting, leaving one spot in the front three, and it's got to be, say, Torreira and Xhaka or Guendouzi. There's not a lot of spots left, but Mkhitaryan has, if he had just arrived at the club, I think we'd all be fucking raving about him. I think he has stepped into the gap that's been left by the Ozil and Ramsey uncertainties over the first three games. I think Mkhitaryan, we give Bellerin lots of credit, and he should have, but it's fucking Mkhitaryan who's running that corner over there. 44% of our attacks are through that corner. Nothing happened on the Iwobi and Nacho side because there was no real point to. Just get it over to fucking Mkhitaryan and he'll run that triangle in his in-to-out runs. I think he's been sensational.
You know what he's really good at? He plays brilliant little entry passes from the channel. You know what I mean? Whether it's the overlap or just a little slid ball across the top of the box or kind of finding the ball between the center back and the fullback. You know what I mean? He has a really good eye for the player running into the box, and we haven't always had that. And Bellerin, now seems to be getting the point of pulling the ball back to the spot and doing a little better when he gets to the touchline. And that has made that a really, really dangerous flank for us. I think, and I'll give Mkhitaryan credit defensively. I mean, he wasn't always in the position he needed to be, but he was always running, always working, always, harrying his man. I think it's certainly not a lack of work rate. I think where you worry is when you see players that are jogging or aren't switched on. And I will say this about Guendouzi. I love the kid, as you know. I'm totally on board the hype train. I do think there were moments in this game where he could have been more alive to danger. And the defensive instincts in his game are not there yet. And you could say, well, that's true for Xhaka too, to some extent. But I think if Guendouzi is going to continue to start in this system, he's going to have to mature defensively. And it may be time now that he naturally, as a 19-year-old, making a huge step up, takes maybe a step back to Europa League or something just to kind of get his feel for the team. We'll see how that goes.
I very much agree with that, Elliot, except I thought his performance in the game wasn't particularly good when I watched it live. When I went back and watched it, I actually think he had a pretty good game. I still agree with your basic point. It may be the time at which Torreira is brought in and, Guendouzi is really off the bench and coming on in the second half and Europa League for a little while. But I didn't actually, on second look at it, I actually thought he was still playing at a pretty good level.
Statistically, it was a fine game. Go ahead.
He started well and faded. Yeah. That's all that happened. And if you look at the other games, he also faded in those games as well. But we kept him on. And this was smart management. Take him out. Don't let him pull something. He was playing League Two last year, and he's suddenly playing against City, Chelsea, and West Ham. Just take him off. It's no problem. You're 19, mate. Settle down on the bench. How did you find that? Do you know what I mean? Yeah. No drama there. Yeah. That kid's the future. He is the future of our midfield. In the early part of that game, I couldn't take my eyes off him. Collision, turn around, spread the play. He got caught in the right-hand channel of a slide tackle he didn't make. They came in down Bellerin inside. He gave the ball away, Paul, you're absolutely right. Suddenly, you're in debit. You're in debit now, mate. Can you get into credit? No, you can't. Time to sit down, son. No problem. Yeah. It's no problem at all. It's just football.
So, all right, let's wrap up on this game and get to the Ozil thing really quickly as we've started to run predictably long. But, Tim, first of all, just 30,000-foot view coming away from this game. Obviously, the 3 points were the most important thing. On XG, it was, I think 1.9 or 1.6 to 1.3 in that range, something like that. And a lot of that XG for us came from the Welbeck goal that made it safe at the end. Do you come away from the game, putting the result aside, which, again, I realize you can't do that in football, but do it for a second. Is this a step forward in the process for you, or was this a sideways step or a step back? What was your emotional reaction to the performance you saw?
At this early stage, everything is a step forward in the process. So if we get beat 5-0, it's a step forward in the process because...
When do we go to City?
Because when that happens, you go, right, Did you ever see that quote from Chris Coleman when he was managing Sunderland, and they said to him, like, what does Sunderland need to do to turn things around? And he said the exact opposite of everything we've done for the last 5 years. And so even if you lose 5-0, you go, right, let's just not do any of the stuff we did in that game again. We're in a stage of like gathering information effectively. And we've talked about this, how the manager is accumulating information on his players. And it's all data at the moment, basically. And all of that data is equally useful. And only the fullness of time will show us what's useful and what's not useful. So at the moment, everything's kind of a bit of a baby step forward. And
but is that really how you came away? I guess what I'm saying is, like, did you look at this and see a performance that encouraged you, or and I get it. I get what you're saying about process. Yeah. I'm just saying, like, what did your eyes tell you? Were you like, this was ugly?
Yeah. My emotional reaction immediately after the game was this was not really a good performance. That defensively we looked exposed and a better team would have punished us. And going forward, until Lacazette came on, save for the Bellerin Mkhitaryan thing, we didn't have a lot going forward until Lacazette came on. Lacazette, when he came on, I think made a big difference. There was just a bit more movement up there. You look at that Welbeck goal again. Look at Lacazette's front post run, completely takes the defender away from Welbeck. And that was the kind of thing we didn't, I bet Aubameyang was probably looking at that from the bench and thinking, fucking hell, I really could have used that about half an hour ago, rather than having three defenders on me all the time with with just like green grass around me. So it's my emotional reaction was that actually this was maybe the least encouraging of the three performances. But my kind of logical reaction is that, like I said, it's all useful data at the moment.
Right. And Clive, I'll let you come in. I just want to say one thing about that. And that's all I'm saying, Tim. Like, I think it is compatible to say, I looked at that and felt it was ugly and didn't like that performance. And also know that it's part of the process on the road to where we're going. So, I don't think it's petulant to have a reaction to the game. Otherwise, what's the point of watching it? Just tune it out for the whole season and let me know where we finished, So so I think that's totally fine and totally fair. And I think for me, the reason this was worrying, the only reason I got a little worried is, Arsene Wenger got accused of not having a plan B. Remember that? That used to be the thing. Oh, he doesn't have a plan B. And then it was Giroud is the perfect plan B and all these things. But the thing that worried me here is just in the first two games, I saw how dangerous we could be in transition with our press. In this game, I saw the challenges we have doing it another way, building from the back. That's where we looked really not ready, half-baked, was our in possession sort of build-up, trying to create opportunities that way. And that worries me only because against maybe 13 or 14 of the teams in the league, that's what you're going to need to do. So ironically, we might be better suited to playing the bigger teams than we are the smaller teams at this point. We'll have to see that. Everyone gets a last quick word then. So, Clive, let's start with you. Last quick word before we just give our thoughts on the Ozil absence.
I think it's down to personnel, Elliot, right? It's down to, you think about why was the build-up better in the second half? Well, we had a build-up player in Lacazette come on. If you think about another player that's very big part of our build-up, I call him the washing machine. You give him the ball, he tidies it up and cleans it up and sends it out the other side. Is Ozil, right? He cleans up difficult possession and makes it clean.
Yeah, that's a great point.
So you take those two players out, our build-up was rocky. And what was exposed was not playing out from the back so much, but playing in that middle third and the transition that then West Ham put on us. And with Mikel Antonio and Anderson and the left back, can't remember his name now, they are pretty rapid. And Fredericks on the right-hand side, these are not slow players, and they're quicker than us. And their transition was really fast. And we were in trouble. We were in trouble trying to catch them. So it's the quality of that middle phase build-up, which we were asking players to do a job, which they're not very good at in Aubameyang and Ramsey. They're not build-up players. They are final flourish players.
Yep.
They are the final touch. I'm going to make a run for me to get into position for me. Lacazette will make a run for his strike partner. Right, he will make a 15-yard run to knowing he's not going to get the ball, to someone else will get the ball. So if we've learned something from this game, we must have two forward-type animals in that front three, not have Iwobi and Mkhitaryan, because I think they do the same job. You need a forward animal, whether it's Welbeck or Aubameyang or Lacazette. You need two of those on the pitch at all times, because that creates trauma up for the other team. And then you get a forward combination. You get people who can receive the ball back to goal. Lacazette had one simple one. Ramsey had loads of these. He got the ball back to goal. He's a midfielder, so he knocks it off to the nearest man and then ran round the corner. Lacazette, feet to goal, shake and bake, left foot shot, nearly a goal. You know, he's a forward. That's what you want. You want your forwards receiving the ball in those areas. So we're learning things, but just not quickly enough for my liking as a fan. But I'm prepared to not be an idiot and wait.
That totally
and wait.
well said. Yeah, and I think this is the other challenge that Emery has, and I feel for him starting with City and Chelsea away, is that the kind of football that you can play against those teams that are in City, for example, further ahead of you in their process and just better, and in Chelsea, for example, just a really tough matchup because of the quality of their players, versus the kind of game you can play against the bottom half of the league, are two very different types of football. And, you know, the one thing I'll say about Arsene Wenger, his last 10 years, his career was based almost entirely on beating up on the bottom half of the league. And that's how we stayed top four all those years. You know, we were always awful in the top 6 league or whatever, top 4 league, but we were brilliant at beating up on those small teams. And Emery may be turning us into a team that can win big games, but unfortunately, a big part of the job is being a team that can win the small games, and lots of them. So we'll see. So, Paul, final thought on the game, and then we're just going to touch on Mesut.
No, let's get on to Mesut. I think
Okay.
I share people's frustration at the end of the game. I just had prepared myself that I was going to be frustrated at the end of this game. I think it's going to be one step forward, one step back. That's all.
Yep. Okay. Good stuff. So let's do this. So Mesut Ozil misses the game, and you know, he has now missed 7 games in the last 20 months through illness, or at least, you know, illness has been stated as the reason. I think there's one thing that we'll all make clear here. I think I can say this for everyone, is first of all, you know, you can speculate about any number of things about a person, but speculating is a little bit irresponsible when it comes to mental health, physical health, you know, immune health, whatever it is. So we can only go on statements that are made by people that suppose they have information about the situation. So the one thing I will say is, it seems like a lot of games to miss through illness. It seems like Mesut Ozil misses more time for this reason than the average footballer, and I don't think that can be contested. You know, Mesut Ozil is our star player, our highest paid player, and so he is naturally going to get a lot of attention when he misses games like this. Also, it's not like Monday after the Chelsea game, news came out that Mesut wasn't feeling well, and we'll see how he feels at the end of the week. I mean, you know, this comes up at the very, very last minute. So again, a little bit eyebrow-raising. Then a journalist for ESPN comes out and says that, in fact, there was a bust-up between Emery and Ozil, that Ozil was going to be dropped, and that he refused to show up to sit on the bench. Now, look, there are some people that are outraged that is even being entertained, that this journalist's statement is even being contemplated as possibly being true. Emery himself said, no, he's sick, ask the doctor, you know, and people say, so that's it, that settles it. Tim, I want to start with you because I think, at a minimum, someone deserves to have the benefit of the doubt, you know, for not just being a lying, mendacious asshole, right? If someone is a journalist for The Sun and they have a history of writing clickbait garbage and they have no integrity and they say something and you say we need to dismiss it because of where it's coming from, I totally understand that. Can you at least give us a little bit of color, a little bit of background on the person making this claim and whether there is any reason to maybe consider it as credible?
Yeah, okay. So full disclosure, I know Joao. I know him, not just his work. I know him personally. I know him as a friend. And when I say a friend, I don't just mean someone I talk to on Twitter occasionally. He's been in my house, actually. Well, my old house, because I've only been in this house for like 48 hours.
So not that good a friend. I'm just kidding.
So I know him personally, and you can take that one of two ways, right? So you can say, I know him, I know his character, I know his work because he works for ESPN Brazil, and for fairly obvious reasons, I follow that work, and I follow that work because I know him personally as a friend. So you could say that colours my judgment somewhat, but what I can give you is some background on João. First of all, he's an Arsenal fan. He moved to Brazil. He moved to London from Brazil when he was 9. Lived in North London. Went to school in Camden. Big Arsenal fan. Secondly, he's not really like a reporter, journalist. He makes video content for ESPN Brazil. That's what he does. So this is why I've worked with him a few times. He likes to do stuff with fans. He likes to, because he's broadcasting to people who are very far away, he likes to give it like local colour. So he goes around the ground. He talks to supporters. He talks to people behind the scenes and things like that. He makes, I'm going to use that awful phrase, engaging video content, but that's what he does. Okay. He's not a hack. And usually he doesn't really report on information or anything like that. He gets player interviews. He does pitch side stuff. Read his tweets. They're all about what fans are chanting and things like that. He tries to give some domestic colour to games for people in Brazil. So this isn't really the sort of stuff he does. But he is at Arsenal a lot. He does know people. He has contacts. And, I can only tell you, and how much you take my word for it is completely up to you. But I would absolutely put my word alongside João's, and I'm not saying that I have that information or that information was given to me. It wasn't. But as far as I'm concerned, he gathered that from more than one source, and if that's what he says, I'm telling you as someone that knows him, then that's what's happened. I would also say, if you look read a little bit between the lines here, I don't think Arsenal are making a massive effort to protect Mesut Ozil here. Saying he's ill, Arsenal aren't stupid. They know that people roll their eyes and clack their tongues when people say Mesut Ozil is ill. They could have said a lot of other things. And don't get me wrong, he might just be ill, and that might be the end of it. If he was, then, and listen, João's word has been vindicated by several other journalists since. There's a lot of stuff that came out on Sunday night when the journalists did the roundtable stuff with Emery on Saturday after the game, and things came out like Ozil was in the dressing room for an hour before the game. If he's ill, what the fuck is he doing in the dressing room around everyone that's about to play? And Emery kind of sheepishly had to say, well, if someone else gets ill, that's on me. That absolutely does not happen at an organisation like Arsenal, with all those doctors and all of those player performance people. And Darren Burgess, by the way, spends the day with the team. He leads the warm-up now. He is in that dressing room. I promise you, if Mesut Ozil has got the sniffles and he is within 100 yards of that dressing room, Darren Burgess is pushing him away, probably pushing him into an armoured car and telling him to fuck off. Right? If he's ill, he's not in the dressing room. It's as simple as that. And I think Emery was, and we know that Emery doesn't quite probably have the language skills to really talk around these subjects quite yet. So I think it's quite clear something has gone on. And like we said earlier, eggs get broken in organizational change, but I've written about this for this week, so I'll let the other guys talk about that. But to give you the kind of color, João's word is absolutely 100% trustworthy. He has no reason to lie about this. This is not really what he does. It's not his job. His job does not depend on getting information like this. And if he got it, that's because, in my view, Arsenal aren't really trying to protect it that much. And when they say something like, oh, he's ill, instead of, oh, he had a tight hamstring or a tight calf, then to me it means they're not really, they're not quite hanging him out to dry, but they're not exactly taking him inside either, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say this, of course he could have bad information. That is totally possible. Yeah. I mean, a lot of good journalists were given bad information about Mikel Arteta becoming the next Arsenal manager, including Ornstein. I don't think that means they're bad journalists who are clickbait cunts. I think it means they got information that was wrong, and it happens. What I will say is that, people who tell you he should just be dismissed out of hand and it's ridiculous to even entertain what he said, that's as much wish casting as anything. The decision to dismiss someone because you don't like what they're reporting or they haven't reported on this before, is certainly a decision you can make, but I think it reflects a bias just as much. Clive, one of the things that there's been a really interesting debate about on Twitter, I know, hard to imagine, but it's happening. I think it's really interesting. And I'll go to the Arscast, actually, because I thought Andrew made a great point on the Arscast talking about how in the summer, Emery talked about Ozil and said, we're here to help him. This is his family now. And just after this game, we're here to help him. This is his family now. And these are the kinds of comments that you don't just make about every regular player. There's clearly a managing of this player. So one of the things I want to ask you is just how much of Emery's job is to manage Mesut Ozil as our highest paid, biggest star at the club, and how much of Emery's job is to not manage Mesut Ozil and instead manage the club, and whatever happens with Ozil, so be it.
I think a big part of Emery's job is to manage people. Simple as that. You've got elite footballers with elite talent, elite athletes, all at an elite football club, and you have a group of massive egos to get to that level. Trust me, you have to have one. And he has to manage people. And some of that will be tactical, some of that will be emotional, some of that will just be organizational and people management. It's a big part of coaching. I do a bit of coaching. I'm a much better people coach than I am a coach, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
It's always about extracting those intangibles from individuals by understanding the game and understanding how to deploy them, understanding the individual emotionally and where he feels comfortable. That's a big part of the game. I sort of had a brief clumsy attempt when I was talking about overcoaching recently. And the reason why I wanted to go down that path is that the next development for me in football is watching how players cope with the stress of top-level sport. I think the game has changed massively, and I think coach's job is to create a place where they can perform, where they can be accountable, and where their jobs are almost reduced so they feel comfortable on the football pitch. And I think that applies to Mesut Ozil. I think it applies to many, many other players. I just think it's where it's going, Elliot. I think you get some people who are not footballers that struggle with the stress of social media and have to come off. And they're not in the spotlight, right? And they come off social media because they can't take the abuse, the chat. It just becomes too much for them. And then you add that to a football context. You add that to the Goldfish Bowl, which is the game. It's a new soap opera in life. And then why would you expect young men to cope with this perfectly every single time? It's why I got a bit angry with the crowd at the weekend. I think we have to be far more sympathetic. And I can hear people say, hey, Clive, they get paid on 50 grand a week, blah, blah, blah. So what? If you don't feel right, it's not gonna come out right. And one thing that happened at the weekend, whether the story is true or not, I hope it is true. I hope it exactly happened as it happened, because we need to sort this out. It needs to be addressed. And the fact he came to the dressing room, I think is brilliant, because maybe he thought, you know what, I reacted wrongly the day before. I'm going to come back and show my solidarity. I'm not in the squad, but I'm going to show my face, and that's to show everybody else I need to change my behaviour. So I actually hope it happened exactly as people are surmising, because we do need to really find out really quickly who's on board, who's not. We need to blow this up. You've heard me say it before. We need to blow it up, and the quicker we find out who's on board, the better, because January is going to be massive for this football club, because we cannot have 3 to 4 years outside the Champions League, and that's where we're heading unless we address these points really, really quickly.
I think that's well said. And look, for the past few seasons, if you were manager of Madrid, first and foremost, you were manager of Cristiano Ronaldo. Manager of Barca, you're manager of Lionel Messi, first and foremost. Manager of PSG, Unai Emery, ask him, what was the job being PSG manager last year? First and foremost is managing Neymar. That sucks. That's hard, and it doesn't always work. But it is reality that the biggest stars, the highest paid players, you've got to get them on board for a few reasons, because other players look to them. In some instances other players don't like them. I don't know if players like Cristiano Ronaldo, but if he wasn't on board at Madrid, they couldn't have achieved what they did. So I don't see us achieving a whole hell of a lot if Ozil doesn't get on board and perform well. It also becomes a huge problem if you have this much of your money tied up in a player that you can't get the most out of. So there's a lot of reasons we need to get the best out of Ozil, and part of the management job, and I think you said it so well, is managing egos. Clive, you have to be able to do that. So, Paul, 2 quick questions for you. First and foremost, do you believe, forget what you know, do you believe that deep down there is kind of an issue here? Or do you just think Ozil gets sick sometimes and we're all reading too much into it?
I think very probably there's an issue here. Very probably it went down as we're hearing, at least 80% approximation to what we've heard, and that it is what it is.
Yeah. And so, I mean, for you, how important is it for Arsenal that Emery get his hands around this and get it corrected?
I don't know, really. I think it is more important that we do what we're doing, and that these sparks and fireworks we're seeing are, as Tim had said, there's going to be some of this stuff. I mean, coming into this season, my big concern was, how do you develop a system around the name brand players, the big players that we can't crack the code on? The Xhaka Ramsey issue, the Ozil issue, and what I wanted to see was for the manager to basically throw everybody off the team sheet and start putting them back in, as opposed to these are the first names on the team sheet. So, I mean, there are Spurs has gone a long way with players that were not fucking world name brand players to progress. And yes, we've got a lot of money tied up in this guy.
Yeah.
He can still play a big role for us. Maybe he'll become central to how we play. But I think it's best. There's no way Emery can impose his style while making Ozil continuously, a continuous thread of Ozil from day one, central to the team sheet. So he had to come out. He has to eat a certain degree of humble pie, relearn the role. I mean, Aguero basically got bumped from City, and he got his chance after injury with Gabriel Jesus, and had to relearn the expectations of the manager, which is working both sides with the ball. And Ozil's going to have to eat some humble pie and decide whether he wants to do it or not. But I wouldn't drop Mkhitaryan. If we want Aubameyang and Lacazette in, there's your front three. He's not going to be either the two pivots. That leaves one place in the middle of the park.
It's Ramsey or Ozil, isn't it?
Yeah.
Comes back down to that.
And or Guendouzi, it's not necessarily not Guendouzi taking one of those three spots. So,
but between Ramsey and Ozil,
Iwobi,
one of them's on $350,000 a week for the next few years, and one of them's at the end of his contract.
Yeah, but I agree with all of that. The heartening part of it is, unlike at PSG, Emery must be perceiving the club has given him full backing to do whatever he needs to do with the star players, and he's just wondering about what combinations work best, which is, that's the upside of it. He's clearly demonstrating he has backing, and that he's, at least the club's saying, let's get out of his fucking way and let him get on with working it. And he's yanking people at halftime, putting people in at halftime, Ramsey off the bench. Fucking great.
Yeah, it's funny. I hate Jose Mourinho, the filthy cunt, but one thing that he was known for is showing up at a club and taking a favorite player that was a big player at the club and just sacking him off, just being like, I don't need you. Juan Mata at Chelsea comes to mind. I think he had won their player of the season. He was one of the beloved players there, and Jose rocked back up there and was like, I don't need you. Go away. Yep. And sometimes you do have to do that to upset the balance. Tim, I want to finish with you on this point. All of us gave a full-throated defense of Mesut Ozil and what he's been through this summer. I think it's very unpleasant and unseemly, some of the stuff he has faced. Having said that, Mesut Ozil also has blessings in his life that all of us and all of the listeners could only dream of having. That doesn't mean he can't go through hard times, but I'd be willing to bet all of us on this podcast have gone through very hard times. Everyone listening to this podcast has gone through hard times without a fraction of the resources, the support, the opportunity, and the blessings that Mesut Ozil has. So my question to you is, what is the right balance between providing empathy, sympathy, understanding for the condition of a professional footballer who has a brilliant life but does face hardships, and at the other end of the spectrum, maybe saying, you know what, I get on with it every fucking day, get on with it. Like, what is the right balance in your mind between the empathy and the expectation?
Yeah, it's difficult without knowing the exact detail on the player and the exact emotional impact and the exact toll that it's taken. I think I said when we recorded over the summer that I didn't exactly expect to see Mesut Ozil coming out of this with a clenched fist, because it's just not the type of guy he is, right? And that's not a criticism. That's not me, and that's not me even casting aspersions on his character. It's not the type of person I am either. Quite frankly, it's you can't change somebody's character. And there's light and shade, and there's good and bad. And Ozil just doesn't strike me as the kind of guy. He strikes me as the kind of guy that might think, might contemplate on it. And whether it affects his performances, I wasn't too sure either way. But I didn't necessarily think that what we'd get would be kind of, I'm going to show you, you bastards, because that's not who Mesut Ozil is. When has he ever played like that? Even when life's great and he's in a good mood, that's just not who he is. That said, like I say, it's delicate because we don't know the exact toll and impact and things like that. I think the minimum expectation is that you turn up for work. If you turn up and your performances are a little bit subpar and it's potentially weighing on your mind a little, well, that's because you're human, and that's the manager's job to help manage that, and his teammates and his peers and colleagues, and we've got lots of great psychologists at the club and things like that who work on these things. These details players aren't just left to kind of look after these things themselves if they don't want to. That said, the minimum expectation is that you turn up to work. And again, like you say, some information has been disseminated, but we're only getting that from one side, and we probably, like Paul said, we probably still don't know 100% of the detail. But I mean, I think it's fair to say you don't say, I'm not sitting on the bench this weekend, fuck off, I'm not training tomorrow. You don't do that. That's that I think that's the minimum expectation. The minimum expectation is that you turn up to work and you try and get through it the best way you can. And different people will have different ways of doing that. But unless you're again just thinking of a more kind of conventional professional environment, unless you're like actually signed off with which does happen in real life. You're signed off with stress and things like that. Unless that's happened, which it doesn't really sound like it has here. It sounds like this is an altercation, and it, you can only speculate how much what happened over the summer plays into this, but we're kind of guessing. There's no reason to believe really that it has. We're just we're guessing, and we're trying to construct narratives because we don't really know, because there's an information void there. So we're going, well, maybe he's a bit down about what happened in the summer, and that's perfectly possible, and it might even be probable, but we're completely guessing. We have no idea. But like I said, the minimum expectation is you don't give your boss the V sign and say, I'm not turning up to work tomorrow.
Yeah, and look, let's put it this way. If you have an ankle injury, right? If your ankle hurts, you play. If your ankle is sprained, you don't play. Right? There are gradations of injury, some of which you can play through and some of which you can't. I would say with mental wellness, mental health, there is a similar gradation. If you're sad, if you're stressed, you play. If you are clinically depressed, you probably don't play, and you treat that because it's very, very serious. I think invoking depression when you don't know it is hugely disrespectful to people that are afflicted with it, and totally undermines an appreciation and understanding of how serious that mental health condition is, and is shameful behavior. To just diagnose that out of thin air is absolutely reprehensible and shouldn't be done. And I will say, look at Per Mertesacker. Per Mertesacker gave a very interesting and open and honest interview last season. You guys remember it, where he talked about how much he has struggled through his career with stress and how he would almost, he'd throw up before games. Per Mertesacker won World Cups, FA Cups, played every game he could, captained Arsenal, until he was too injured, too old. But the point is, he clearly had less than grade A 100% mental health during his playing career. It affected him. It's a very stressful environment, but he also said he wouldn't change a thing, that he'd go back and do it again. So these guys are under tremendous pressure. That comes with the job. All of us have challenges in our life, and all of us get up every day and confront them. And so I don't think it's not empathetic to say, Mesut, I get that you're going through a hard time, but you owe us professionalism and you're compensated for it. If it's something more serious, fine. And by the way, if people are saying, oh, well, he has an immune system issue, he has an autoimmune problem, and so he is sick a lot. I mean, sure, could be. Strikes me as a little weird that we would sign him up to the contract we did knowing that. But again, as Tim said, well, there is an information void there that we can't fill. So we'll see what happens. We'll see how it goes. I do think Mesut Ozil is a crucial part of this team. We have made him a crucial part of the team with the money we paid him. He is, at its core, a very, very talented player, and hopefully one that Emery can get the best out of. So I think we should leave it there, pushing an hour and 45 minutes, as usual, despite our best intentions. But Paul's on Twitter at Paz in my pants. Thanks, Paz.
Woohoo!
Tim's on Twitter at Stillberto. Thanks, Tim.
My pleasure as always.
Clive's on Twitter at ClivePAFC. Thanks, Clive.
Thank you very much.
This is what it's all about, everybody. Passion. People care about this stuff, and I don't think that there's anything wrong with being very emotional about it, as long as at some level that emotion doesn't overcome your ability to be rational about it. I know it does for me most of the time. My name's Elliot Smith. You can block me on Twitter at Yankee Gunner. Give us a 5-star review if you don't mind. If you do mind, give someone else a 1-star review and pretend you gave it to us. Go to our Patreon, sign up, get great content, get our undying love. You have it anyway just for listening. And, if you do go there, though, later this week in the Spotlight, Hector Bellerin will be the episode that goes up. And all of these episodes show up totally ad-free, although then you wouldn't get to hear about Beer 52, which is clearly the greatest craft beer service in the world. In any event, we really appreciate you listening. We'll come back with more this week, and we'll talk to you after Arsenal 10, Cardiff 0.